A young female figure is immersed in a garden of flowers, a vertical garden that doesn't recede into deep space, but presses itself onto the surface of the photograph. She has flowers behind her, in front of her, upon her, all around her. Her form is rhapsodized by stitches of blooms and leaves, engulfed by nature but not contained by the three levels of representation that compress figure and ground. In front, real flowers and leaves are artfully arranged as crown or heart or girdle. Then there are painted flowers, leaves, vines and sometimes butterflies, sprinkled in the prints of period dresses. And finally there are prints in the backdrop made from post-war bark cloth. And because all three levels have similar colours and mood, they parley in intricate overlap so that the figure simultaneously comes from behind and stands in front of the garden. Who are these girls, these dryads, nymphs, children of some tranquil bosque, a flattened grove, a bower of light and bloom? They seem to personify something about the flowers, but what? Polixeni stitches identity and space together in the same way that flowers are stitched together in a wreath, the one wand entwined within the space of the other, or vines and branches woven on a trellis. In building this art bower, Polixeni might have been thinking of Mantegna or Botticelli. The very word bower derives from a knot, a bow, a tying together around an armature where strands are interwoven, locked in, both strengthened and encumbered with their unity. In Eden, the trammelled armature is the human herself. It's hard to extract the information that you typically want for separating the planes. They're knitted, commencing with the flowers themselves, which Polixeni conceived in collaboration with the florist. The delicate blooms are connected onto one another's stalk, threaded so as to form a unity, and so, with the consonant properties of the dresses and the backdrops, they form an integrity of space where the sprays and convolutions and overlap of flowers, leaves, tendrils and pods are stitched, or as the Greeks said, rhapsodized into the single plane. The virtue of this collapse of space onto a single plane is visual rhapsody, because the gaze of the spectator has plenty of places to go, ranging all over a large field of evenly weighted visual elements, a bit like in a painting where the brushstroke in the corner may be just as present as those in the centre. Flowers abound in European literature, in the horticultural abundance of a palatial garden evoked by the 14th century Giovanni Boccaccio, where wide areas are embowered with vines, where a profusion of jasmine and other flowers makes odoriferous and delightful shade. Those images are picked up in 16th century writers like Pietro Bembo, who evokes a bower with thick jasmine overlaid with live undergrowth. By the Baroque, the image of the bower reached the heavenly, as in Milton's thicket overgrown all round Eden, where the verdurous wall of paradise upsprung, and even the embrace of Eve and Adam is described as a kind of heavenly knot, emparadised in one another's arms, as bliss on bliss. Each wonder is folded onto another. The biblical Eden is also a tangled or layered place, because unlike Arcadia or heaven, it has the encumbrance of an expiry, a use-by date, when God chases Eve and Adam from the gates. The symbolic Eden has a short history, bookended in our imagination by the creation of Adam, because why would you make Eden if not for our progenitors? And the tragedy of the fall in Adam's lifetime. Eden is no use after that time, because there are no longer any innocent humans who deserve it. They're all fallible and unworthy of the luxury. So, as a divine invention, Eden is a failed project, a bad investment, squeezed in its use over the billions of years that the planets have been turning to the lifetime of only 2 humans. It's chronically crushed, tied up in time, created for a disaster, and then laid to waste. There'd be many readings of the biblical place to match Polixeni's intuitive walled garden, her enclosed photographs that spread out over the vertical picture plane with minimal depth. One reading would be directly allegorical, that Eden is childhood, a period at the beginning when we're innocent and which we subsequently lose, perchance intermittently regaining it by imaginatively connecting to our childhood. But the photographic models vary in age. Eden isn't a portrait of childhood. It doesn't read as a documentation of different stages of development. Besides, not every youngster has a childhood which is Edenic. Many, alas, are denied the utopia that we romanticise. Another allegorical reading would be to match the myth of Eden to life cycles and mortality, and sure, the pictures may accommodate that theme, but they're hardly confined to the grim discourse of vanitas or memento mori. We're as much drawn to optimism as gloom. We think of Eden as somehow recoverable by artifice, as if we could maybe reinvent it with a satisfactory substitute, my bower in fairyland. Eden exists for a provisional moment in everyone's imagination with the mere mention of the word. Eden can never be rebuilt, but it can be proposed. In fact, Eden can only ever be commended to the imagination, slipping effortlessly between innocence and luxury, artlessness and wantonness. Maybe every gardener unconsciously creates an Eden, some counterpart, and the way that a garden is felt also accommodates both the high-minded and the sensual, the serene and the exciting, the intellectual and the erotic. Through the large collection of stories by the 16th century novelliere Matteo Bandello, the bower features often as the naughty place for an amorous assignation by stealth, or a luxurious kind of philosopher's cave where the courtiers and aristocrats of the Renaissance gather to relay and ponder stories, to interpret them in elegant peace, as if transcending into an ideal world of reflection. Polixeni weaves together much more than space, but metaphor, metaphors of growth, nature, life cycles, the sacred, the ideal, and even the all-over aesthetic field constitutes a kind of metaphor, the rhapsodic, the imaginary, the connected. But with all the metaphors of her close and consecrated bower, there's a base in the realities of the models, real people who are the artist's daughter and her friends. They all have lives with diverse and exceptional experiences, and each has a token of difference in their floral adornments. They all share the motif of flowers, but the differences between each ornamental arrangement make each distinctive, suggesting intrigue or pathos or love or melancholy. The models look at you with reserve, in which they weave their own thoughts, to which you have limited access. For Polixeni, the bower stands for the preserve of the individual, the quintessentially safe place that is the interior, the inner realm of thought where we weave connections, synapses, an emotional haven, a bower of immanence. It has love in it, but otherworldly, imaginary and eternal.